So there is technology out there called parallel projection or parallel coordinates, and that helps you. It doesn't put it into the 3D space that we're all used to, but it does help you.
Oh yeah, I agree. Parallel coordinates, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, is the same basic kind of concept. You have 100 variables, so you have 100 vertical lines. Each line is a variable, and you plot the current measurement for that variable in the context of where it's at. And then you kind of connect the dots to form like a trace across these variables. It is trying to do the visualization that the mathematics goes beyond. If you're using that, proceed. It's better than doing nothing. However, be careful how you arrange your variables, because you're putting them side by side. There's a gotcha there. If you have 100 variables side by side, if I put this one next to that one, it forms a certain visual pattern that's going to influence your interpretation. And if you put those same two variables but space them apart by 150 variables, you won't see the relationship. So with parallel coordinates, do you have to do all combination of putting these side by side to interpret it? The answer is, well, yeah, if you really want to understand it. So again, it is more insightful than doing nothing, but there are other things to really derive insight into the process. And at some point, you may wish to consider that for what it's worth.
My brief comment would be, we in our job, we're always analyzing data. But I'll fall back to a comment that was made in the presentation on analytics and display yesterday, dashboards, and that was that once you leave the realm of Excel in doing your analysis, you always need an analytics capability. Okay, there's a question here.
I'm Velapan from Dolphin Energy in Qatar. We are a gas processing plant. I'm head of automation there. We are looking into implementing some alarm management system in our things. I have a couple of questions. I presume that your basic process control system is Delta V, and you already have an alarm management system over that. And the results or the alert system which you implemented is over the alarm management system. Is it right in that way?
I can speak first. Yeah, so we focus initial rolling out the alarm management system. Can you hear me? We have a philosophy, alarm management philosophy and alert management philosophy. And because they're pretty distinct systems, we actually have a separate alarm screen and alert screen. And we were really focused on defining KPIs for the alarm system and getting those in place first, because those had the shorter time to respond, higher consequence, and the alert system is coming in following behind it, but it enables us to further reduce the unplanned capacity loss, those types of KPIs that we're looking at.
And the alert system is projected on the same screen as the DCS screen, or is it a separate screen which operator has to look into that?
So currently we have separate screens for the two, and also, but on each of the process screens, we'll have a little indicator that shows whether the alert is active or not.
Yeah.
And another thing we do that's different in alarms versus alerts is alarms will have a noise associated with it, whereas alerts, it's more of just a visual cue. I guess one exception is if the console is arranged in such a way that the alert screen is off to the sides. In that case, we might allow for a little chime or something for the alert system.
And analyzing from the parameters and alarms to develop alerts, you require to translate your process engineers, operation engineers, and operators' knowledge into that. It would require a lot of your engineering time into that. How you are able to manage that, and is it really feasible that way?
So talking to operators is extremely important. I mean, we wouldn't have a customer without the operators, and getting their buy-in on the projects and having, because when we do these projects, they're not really one-off projects. That initial business case basically gets a lot of support, and once we get a few sites with the tool in place, they effectively become our salesperson, and they're able to help us convince other sites to do the projects.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's a similar story within Lubrizol. We have alarm philosophy document that was rolled out globally. indicating the types of data to collect, what's an alarm, what's not, how to set up the control systems, because initially a lot of people just start alarming everything when you really don't need to. We differentiate an alarm from information. That a true alarm needs to be acted on. It's not like an informationary alarm. We treat those completely separate. In Lubrizol, we have everything going to one screen, so it's a little different than the ExxonMobil situation. And then in the context of what I showed in my presentation, if you really were looking at the bubbles around TED, it's marrying alarm data with other information like QA. Why would you ever want to have alarm data with QA? Well, they are related to each other, because one might ask for situations where certain types of alarms are going off on a unit at certain times within certain operations or phases. Is it impacting product quality? It's another piece of information to bring into the puzzle.
All right.
I have two questions for you. First is, there are still facilities which struggle from alarm flooding. So how did you, or how would you convince the operators and ship supervisors to have another layer of, let's say, better alarms? And the second question is, how did you build confidence of your operators on relying on these alerts? Did you do a false positive analysis, and what's your recommendation about reducing false positive and building trusts of operators?
Sure. So alarm flooding is a tricky problem, and I think the industry still struggles with trying to come up with good solutions to that. One thing that we focus a lot on with the alerts, because we're dealing with probabilities, is defining suppressors when the alert shouldn't fire because some normal operational change was made. So let's say a set point change, and you don't want the alert to fire. One advanced technique that's starting to be take hold in the alarm management world is mode-based alarming. And I think the same can be used for the alert world and do mode-based alerting. And then on operator buy-in, it's really important to get them on your side, basically. They become your foot soldiers. It's extremely important to look at and define KPIs that are assessing the overall workload on the operator, because we don't want the operator to be overloaded with the alarms and then they just don't even have any time to look at the alerts. So, and then another thing we can track is like percent acknowledgement. Are they looking at the alerts, and did it lead to a real process save? And then if it did, what we like to do is we like to write one-pagers on kind of success stories. And so here's how the tool was used to make a significant process save. And then those business teams, become heroes for their site, and they help us.
Yeah, to further add on that from a Lubrizol standpoint, I agree with everything that was said, is to really involve the operators and engineers into the process, because oftentimes they're frustrated. So feed off of their frustration. They're managing a lot. They're dealing with all these alarms, and so they could come in and say, well, it's just, which one did I need to act on? It's too much. Feed off of that and basically use that as a basis, at least we did in Lubrizol, to say, well, how could we have approached this differently to bring information in? What could have been suppressed? What needs to surface through? And as a result, they get more engaged in the process because they know they're the ones using the tool and they help design it. And then the flip side is to take available data. Again, there's a lot of information out there. Where did something occur in your history of manufacturing that you would rather have avoided? And then go back and dissect it, so to speak. And no matter how good our companies are, let's face it, those things do occur. Use the data as a basis to say, what could we have done differently? How could we have approached this differently? How could it be set up? How could we act on it? How can we use the information or display it differently to avoid that, to take the right action, and then build that into the process as well? So we took it from a two-pronged approach.
I've got a question for Peter. Peter, not to leave you out. From an Emerson point of view, how do you see this technology fitting into your roadmap moving forward?
Sure. Well, a couple of comments. I actually had a comment on the alarm side, which is I think a lot of sites are tempted to solve alarming problems by adding more technology. And frankly, a good alarm system to me is like taking care of your health. There's really no substitute for diet and exercise or hard work sometimes. And generally, to have a good alarm system, it means being very disciplined and going through every alarm, making sure there is an alarm that doesn't have a specific action associated with it, it's hard work. It's going through and actually getting the alarm system, just so it really is actionable in every time, because I think it was Jeff was talking about exactly that. I mean, this is very different than an actionable alarm. In many ways, when you have an alarm, in your case, it means you failed, right? You've gone past what you'd hope to prevent from occurring in the first place. So don't fall into that temptation of more systems, more technology to fix an alarm system that really just needs some good work. As far as what we're doing here, fundamentally what we hope to do with the batch analytics technology that Bob was talking about is I really look at that as APC for batch. There was a period of time when there was a big upswell of APC, late 80s, early 90s. Manufacturers got a huge production increase from doing that, improved their quality, reduced energy consumption, all these good things. For years, the batch industry has been using that dreaded golden batch. I know Bob considers it dreaded. I do as well, which basically says we don't know any better than to just do what we did the last time it worked right. It's kind of admitting you don't understand what's going on. And we're really hoping that as this technology becomes more mainstream, we'll fix that and make it so that people have a much deeper understanding of the correlations that are happening inside of a batch so they can take corrective action as it goes on and steer it to the proper outcome rather than just hoping that by doing the same things over and over again, they'll get a good result. I do have one caveat. Bob is an excellent guy for testing the functionality of how this stuff works. He's not always, take this as a compliment, Bob, he's not always the best guy for determining how well it's going or how easily it can be deployed across multiple sites. Because I don't know if you noticed in Bob's introduction, but he's a pretty rare guy. He's a statistician and a biochemistry guy, so he has good process understanding and knowledge of statistics. Very rare combination that we don't find in every site. So one of the things that, Bob works great at proving the functionality, and then we feel our job is to make it easier to use all the time and make it easier to deploy and roll out, because that tends to be a very big barrier all the time in getting broader adoption of these tools is, we've talked a lot about not having experienced people, not having enough Bobs roaming around. So if we can't get these things easy to use and easy to deploy by the standard process and process control people inside of a facility, then the projects fail. So Bob's great at proving functionality. But he's actually too skilled in this area to necessarily be always a good beta tester for us on ease of use because he understands it so well.
Yeah, but I do agree with Peter's comment. Ease of use is critical. That's true for all the other vendors. I mean, Emerson is just one. There's other vendors sitting in the audience. Ease of use, integration, simplicity, so that Ted sitting over in that chair gets very quickly at what he needs. Make your systems transparent to him.
Yeah, I'd like to just add that what we're kind of talking about here is human factors. It doesn't matter which industry, whether we're making widgets or making gasoline. And it's kind of that situation awareness model. Make them aware that something's gone wrong. Start to provide them some more detailed information and allow them to go from different levels of abstraction, from the high level to the drill down into the details.
Yeah, Peter also made another comment I want to follow up on. It was, in effect, get your house in order. Before going to detailed relationships, looking at processes, are the loops tuned correctly to begin with? I mean, if they're not tuned, you're introducing variability, and it's going to disguise the relationships and make it more difficult to develop models. Same with alarming. With the advent of being able to alarm things, we saw initially our control engineers saying, okay, measure this, alarm this, alarm that. We had alarms going off all over the place, and a large percent of them shouldn't have been set up to begin with. So going back and just getting the house in order, cleaning it up, there's a lot of benefit just in that. Forget the analytics, advanced analytics and all that. Just getting the house in order and policing that every few years is beneficial.